welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So I would again stress that that entire business with the mosque, rather than seeing Faisal Rauf as an Islamic cleric, Muslim cleric, I would see him primarily as a U.S. government agent, somebody who works for the FBI, works for the Bush administration, works for the current State Department. Look at him in that light, and maybe you'll see the constant refrain of the U.S. ruling class, divide and conquer, and then see if the foundations, as many of them have, line up behind him. That's your divide and conquer. Right? This is something like the New York City school strike of 1968, which turned white Jewish teachers against the black community and vice versa over the issue of community control, giving birth to the neocons and other reactionary tendencies for quite a long time. And now you've got the same thing going on. When you see a setup like this, the imperative is don't be a sucker, don't rush to be duped, don't be anxious to function as a useful idiot. Pull back and take a look at actually what's going on. Who is doing what to whom? Concerning Obama's religion, this is now very much in the news this week, also because of a Pew study indicating that the doubts of the American people on his religious story are increasing rather than decreasing. Well, on the narrow religious issue, who knows? We cannot look into the heart of anybody to know what their religion is, right? And we cannot use outer external indices, right? Whatever you were of some religion at some point, this can be changed in very short order. Plus, there's always the problem of Nicodemism, something we've learned about here in the West, right? During the wars of religion, you had Nicodemism, which simply was you hide your real religion and practice it secretly. So who knows? We had reports that Michelle had brought in one of her relatives who was actually practicing Santeria or some form of voodoo in the White House, and they had to shut that down. So I don't know what the finding is there. The broader problem is that if people regard Obama as somehow subservient to a foreign or external force, this is correct, except it's Wall Street. It's not American national interest. It's not the American people. It's certainly not we the people. It is this supranational London, New York, Soros finance capital, which flies around the world like a modern vampire looking for something to feast on. So if you think that Obama is not on your side, if he's on somebody else's side, he's on the other side, he's on their side, the educated view of that is, yes, he's a Wall Street puppet, as we've been saying here consistently for more than 2.5 years. So let's think then about the questions now of economic program. The really big news this week, China passes Japan as an economy. That's the headline in the Wall Street Journal here, Monday, August 16th. China output beats Japan in milestone, developing country on track to become the world's second largest economy. And obviously, there's much to be optimistic about in this, right? It's one of the greatest exercises in lifting humanity out of poverty, backwardness of millennia that we've ever seen. Now, obviously, it certainly counts as one of the greatest economic miracles of the past century, if not the greatest already. However, it has its limits, right? It has not yet reached into the peasant masses, especially in the interior and Western China, and that remains to be an issue. There's also a big question about workers' rights. Is there a minimum wage? What's the standard of living doing? Why is there not the ability to form trade unions? And I say this not as an enemy of China, but as someone who wishes this project well. From our point of view, what can we learn about it? Well, we see China will pass the United States in manufacturing probably next year. That's a shocker. The United States has been the number one manufacturing industrial country since the 1890s when the U.S. passed the United Kingdom, the British. It has something to do with world domination, doesn't it? So you let the Chinese get ahead in industrial production and manufacturing, they are going to dominate the world. Do you want to just let that happen, or do you want to gear up and give them a run for their money? I think that would be the optimistic American answer. Engage China in a peace race. See who can produce better. And look at the way that the Chinese have done this. They don't have a free market. They're not Austrians. They're not monetarists. They're not reading von Hayek, von Mises, and Milton Friedman. They're reading Friedrich List. They're reading people like this, Peschein Smith, and so forth. They're reading the classics of economic dirigism. And, of course, Friedrich List is the founder of the German historical school of economics, against which these Austrian crackpots have dedicated all of their efforts. There's no free market. Remember, there's a large state sector in China, quite significant, especially among banks. So maybe if you nationalize a few banks and cut off their derivatives, the Chinese have also said at various times that they feel free to default on derivatives. Energy derivatives are very iffy in China, so there's no sacrosanct quality for derivatives. We've also got a very significant emphasis on heavy industry. There are a couple of shipyards in China. If you put them together, they're building one super tanker every 2 weeks. Now, that reminds me of the U.S., right? We were building Liberty ships in about 3 to 4 days by the end of the war. These are super tankers, much bigger. The Chinese can put one out every couple of weeks. There's obviously an industrial policy. They're concerned with industrial production. They don't have a lot of the apparatus that we have here. The renminbi, for example, the people's dollar renminbi, the yuan, is a controlled currency. They manage it according to their needs of exports and the other elements of a dirigistic policy. Now, there's obviously a lot that involved here that's not good, right? You don't want to have a one-party state. That's a tremendous political liability. The other problem they have is this one child per family. That's a tremendous demographic menace, threat to the future stability and prosperity of this entire thing. But on the whole, what you see is people very vaguely aware that China is now moving ahead of the U.S. They're going to pass the United States in nuclear energy sometime between 2020 and 2030. We're going to be stuck here with the 103 reactors that are completely obsolete, left over from the pre-Carter period, and China will be forging ahead with the most modern types. The Chinese space program is going to have Chinese astronauts looking down on the wretched land-bound U.S. sometime in the same time frame. So 2025, the collapse of empire over here begins. So whenever you hear these Austrians saying, let's have tax cuts for the rich, let's have free market, let's do all this stuff, factor in the cost of learning Chinese, because that's what you're going to have to do. So hats off to this achievement, right? On a human scale, this is it's historical, but at the same time, don't you want to do something to engage a peace race rather than letting this become a one-sided affair? We'll be back in a minute.